Greetings, everybody. I wanted to go ahead and drop this video. Now, this is kind of a new thing I'm going to try, a little mixed media. So I'm currently working on a book proposal, one that I was offered to work on a while back, and I'm finally getting around to it based on all the turmoil that I think most of you are aware of has been going on during the fall, particularly since September with my father passing. But interestingly enough, I was working on a particular book proposal concerning grief. And so what I wanted to do today was sort of give a little meta commentary video and then share with you. I'm going to refashion it to be more in line with less blocky paragraphs, basically, and more of a sort of freestyle digital type writing that I normally have been doing with most of my stuff. And then I will possibly include the full normal version at the end in case people want to read it. But I'm basically putting together a proposal centered around grief and the way that the Marvel MCU Phase 4 films played out. So this all basically what I have here is I'm talking about how most of this started back in 2023 with the passing of my friend, my best friend Casey's father, and how we had ended up discussing grief in response to Disney Plus's WandaVision from 2021, and then coming to the realization, along with Casey, who I give full credit for helping me with this, develop this, is about how most of Phase 4 itself is in many ways an expression on one level or another of grief. And this stems from, and I think this is where I think some of the, and my argument is that this is some of where the problems of Phase 4 have arisen from is not just maybe, people didn't like the subject matter material, but it became a strange sort of intersection for where the real world and this sort of fantasy world intersected because the last phase had ended with Avengers Endgame in 2019. And in 2018, half the universe had been wiped out. Avengers Endgame saw the departure of major characters like Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., and Captain America by Chris Evans. And what's interesting is that when we finally come back in 2021, we've also come back from COVID, the same way that the heroes in the fantasy world came back from the blip. And I think what's so fascinating is, and what I'm presenting in part of my argument for this book, is that this had an impact on how parts of Phase 4 were received. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only reason. I'm saying this is one major reason. And despite the return, this idea of how we process grief and how we witness it being processed by these superheroes perhaps put some of us in a either unconscious or subconscious um, bit of how we might say rejection or oppositional to it because we don't necessarily find ourselves, I think, going to these films in order to be shown grief. And I think it would have played differently if we hadn't necessarily gone through the pandemic ourselves. So I think that has a major thing. And one of the things I really wanted to highlight, and I do this in the proposal, is highlighting, and I do illustrate the fact that through some of my own experiences, and this is not necessarily due with my father, but it's an ongoing thing with my father. But even before that, I had really come to understand that what I thought was the stages of grief as being quite linear is not linear at all. It's all over the place. And I use an example of a former friend of mine who I will not name. I've written about this and found positive outlets, but I think this ties into the idea of superhero stories. And of course, I quote Grant Morrison here from his book Super Gods about how superheroes speak to our greatest fears, deepest longings, and highest aspirations. And I think that deepest, greatest fears thing is perhaps the thing we are shunning away from, that we seek to evade. It's too real in a sense of like a Lacanian psychoanalytical view. We are not capable of staring at it. And so we must sort of taper over it and avoid. And so, what I'm basically asserting as part of this book, and you can read below some of what I've had to say in my rough draft version of this, is that there is a trauma, a grief that we did not fully process, and I still don't think we fully processed it. And I specifically highlight the fact that America has, in a lot of localizations, politicized the pandemic and basically tried to sidestep it. We focused on lockdowns and social distancing and masks and vaccines, and we turned these into political footballs rather than realizing that as a collective society and people around the world, not just the United States of America, had basically just gone through something horrible where we witnessed hundreds of thousands of deaths. And rather than process it, we make excuses for it. And then when we turn to our great fantasy escapism of superheroes, we found that instead of necessarily offering us the escapism we were maybe wanting, it gave us a better or darker or even needed look at how the complexity of grief and trauma are being processed and how messy it is. I even write here that some people embraced, and I'm one of those in film and television shows of phase four, while others engage in a mix of anger at the message of the films, calling them woke or whatever else they wanted to come out of the end of it this way, bargaining over choices being made, depression and rejection of the products themselves, denial of the quality of these products not being like they were before. Before what? Before COVID-19, before Avengers Endgame. See, it all kind of mixes in here. And this is what I'm beginning to lay out and what I hope to continue to work on as I prepare my uh, book proposal. So I wanted to share this with you guys now, and you can read the full version of it. I've broken it up and so that it's a little bit more of a free flow, like I normally do with my writing here. And then what I hope to share with you guys next week, if I have the chance, or I may take the holiday off, we'll see, is a little bit of a breakdown of how I see some of the another part of my book proposal, how I sort of see where I find some of these specific elements or specific products put out both in Apple Disney Plus TV and in the MCU film universe. Even though I think all of these films and television shows in many ways deal specifically with all the stages of grief, I have chosen to try and categorize some of them, and I will put that there, and I will also leave it open to dispute. So I hope you enjoy this and take a look at it. And I hope to hear some feedback and comments on it. And we'll go from there. So if you do not hear from me during Christmas break, wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And I will basically be back. I will probably be back to posting this regularly in the new year. So thank you.